So Tom, how do you want to handle the, do you want to take it from the top and
Yeah, I'll just
go
go in
through
order.
and see if we stop you or, and say,
Yeah, I'll just go in order. We went through it fairly quickly at our public hearing last week, so
okay.
let me share the screen. Can I
Oh,
have screen sharing, Montana, please?
You should be all set now.
Okay. All right, so let's just dive in. Um, the first two articles are to complete the reorganization of the bylaw. Woody, you'll recall, you at one point found Concord's bylaw that had only 8 articles of it, and we always wanted to follow that model. So the plan of the first article is to finish the consolidation from 22 into 12. That would mean that the village article would move into 4 as a type of a special use article, so it would go in with uses. 9, 10, 11, and 14 would go into a new article about other land use regulations. And just so you know, for the future, the town has a consulting contract with MAPC, who's going to look at, what is it, 9 is watershed protection and 14 is the floodplain.
no, 9 is floodplain and 14 is water resource.
Yeah, whichever one they are, those two.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, those two plus any kind of new climate resiliency or climate change articles, that's their job. And they have a target of the spring of 25. I have a target of the fall of 24, so we'll see what happens. But so those articles will possibly be redone and edited later on. There's no substantive changes to any of these articles, and I've done an appendix which just shows what they look like, changed from a separate article into sections. So 19 and 20 are the two energy-related ones, and again, no amendments. Working with the Alternative Energy Committee on some amendments that wouldn't come forward until the fall. Article 11 would be left out alone. It would be reserved, but that's the targeted location for a development impact and mitigation bylaw, which, based on Judge Cutler's comments, that's going to be postponed until the fall as well. So that's the simple part of Article 1. It's just to squeeze down the number of articles we have. The second one,
Tom, I just have a question. It's not so much a challenge. It's really a query. Article 10, which is the cluster.
yeah,
Does that ever come into play? I mean, do you guys at the planning
no,
board
but
deal with that? Or is it not relevant? I'm not,
well,
you know,
originally,
active.
yeah, originally I haven't seen it used in a long time, if I've ever seen it used, maybe once. Certainly not since I'm on the planning board has it been used, but when the original set of possible changes to Article 5 was including frontage and lot width, we agreed in the bylaw committee to put that off until the fall to look at that in conjunction with this Article 10. So
Okay.
to look at frontage, lot width, and then the cluster all as one interrelated package and see what changes we might want to make.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm probably philosophically with you. If it's not been used in,
yeah,
20, 30 years,
there's another thing out there called low impact development, and there's a model low impact development bylaw, and we want to take a look at that, whether that's the direction to go in. But
okay, so no harm, no foul if we keep it in for now.
yeah, and it's just been moved wholesale. I could show you the appendix if you want. But
No, that's okay. I mean,
all right, so that's pretty simple on the first one. We
wait,
didn't get we didn't get down to Concord's 8 articles, but 12.
But I don't want to preclude or prevent my colleagues on the zoning board from rendering any opinions. So maybe at every stop,
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean,
I opined, but 5 others
yeah, I
didn't.
personally, I think this is a no-brainer. I think we should have done it
Yeah.
I think we should have done it at the beginning and imposed all the changes on a new superstructure. Judge thinks it should have been done at the end. I think doing it at the end will be a nightmare. So this is a good time to do it. You know, we've amended and keeping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's really the rest of the articles in the bylaw. To account for everything else, 22, which is the overlay, the harbor overlay, that would be eliminated. And 17, the transportation district would be eliminated. And that comes up in the next article. So that'll get our 20, you know, and two of the 22 have already been sunsetted, and we also took accessory dwelling and consolidated that into Article 4. So
Okay, so let's
we've eliminated a number of the 22 articles to begin with. So
right.
this is
So
all
let me turn it over to the board. I mean, and we'll do this every step of the way. Comments on the article ZBC 1, which is just the reorg. I mean, if you agree with it, you don't have to comment. If you're puzzled or have a problem with something proposed, speak up.
And the structure will work well for the future, and it's just the idea of keeping similar topics into an article rather than having what we've done over the years is just continue to add article after article after article.
Right. No, I think we all agree. Well, I don't know if we all agree, but I certainly agree with you that,
Well, I think Mike agrees.
yeah. Consolidating.
Yeah, I
down-
can say, makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, if I'm hearing no comments, let me move to the next one. So the next one, so then the next one was going to be one article that was going to have 3 separate votes in it because I didn't want one proposed change that might be opposed to kill everything else. So the judge has told us to stretch all of this out and make everything a separate article. So that's why it's going to be up to 9 articles at town meeting. In its current structure. So the second one, the articles 2, 3, and 4 are consolidation of districts. And this too is designed to get rid of districts we don't use. In part, it's going like on 3A, the first one, it's going back to what we used to have, which was a single district, commercial district on 3A, and just getting rid of things that we don't use. And so the first step is to take the business districts on 3A and consolidate them into a commercial district. And the 3A commercial is written that way rather than highway business, just because when you see the MBTA thing, that also refers to 3A, just for consistency's sake. So all the dimensions and uses of highway business will be carried over to this district with the additions that there were 3 special permit uses in the technology district that were brought up that we should keep as special permit uses, and that's medical marijuana, wind, and solar. So that's what that all reflects. And then as a result of it, the transportation oriented development overlay would be deleted.
Tom,
Yeah. And that goes back to the past when we just had one commercial district. I think Woody and Charlie might remember, I think a lot of the TB district and the light industry district was mainly constructed to constrain Cohasset Heights landfill. So it wasn't really intended to develop those kinds of industries. So they've never been used. And
does consolidating these districts change any use
No.
or type of use, whether use is of right or special permit use, by consolidating them?
no, other than what we mentioned here, there were
Other than
3.
those 3?
Those 3 special permit uses, Clark had mentioned medical marijuana, and the judge brought up the wind and solar.
Okay. Does it change the jurisdiction of either the planning board or the zoning board over
No,
permits in those?
I just took the HB table in both the uses and the dimensions and just switched it over to this.
Okay.
Switched it to being a 3AC now, so. The transportation and light industry, I think, had larger frontage requirements, but again, they haven't been utilized by anyone and they're not going to be, so. Just go to this is a back to the future thing on 3A. Then you'll see where the MBTA district is going to be an overlay over this. You'll see that in a minute when we get to it. So that's 3A. And the boundaries aren't changing. No boundaries are changing in that one. In the harbor, we have in the commercial districts, and again, Woody, you may remember we talked about this back in the working group about the mishmash of zoning in the harbor. So we have, right now, we have waterfront business. We have one little remainder of downtown business, which is the buildings on the land side of Elm Street near the end. And we also have a light industry district down at the end of Parker Ave with marinas. So again, to consolidate, they would all be consolidated into a harbor district, again, all commercial, and adopting the uses and dimensions of the waterfront business district. The overlay would disappear because the bylaw committee is recommending that there not be an expansion of mixed use in the harbor and possibility of future condos. And then you see number C that I highlighted, 88 Summer Street is the Legion, but it's in Residence B, but it was included within the overlay district. So our thought here, and this is completely optional and can easily be dropped by a motion to amend, but was to include Summer Street into a commercial district and ungrandfather its use. You know, for whatever reason, even though the outlet for James Brook is between the Elm Street properties and the Legion, it was included in the overlay district. So that would be the only boundary change we'd be suggesting, is to take the Legion out of Residence B and move it into this harbor commercial district.
It seems to fit logically.
Yeah, the thought was to also do it to the yacht club at one point, but then I just said, no, let's not worry about the yacht club, leave the yacht club where it is. We could at some point in the future, you know, make the yacht club on the water side, the clubhouse building commercial, but right now it's fine as a grandfathered use or whatever. That's not the term anymore. Pre-existing non-conforming.
Well, you are being politically correct. That's good.
It's been pointed out to me a number of times. I can't get over the bad habit of using grandfather. So that's the thinking on the harbor.
Yeah, I have a similar question here.
Mhm.
We're adopting the uses and dimensions of the waterfront business district in this harbor district.
Yeah.
Is that going to change any of the downtown business district or light industry district
Now, I recall when I looked at the
uses
table,
or dimensions?
yeah, I think the downtown district's dimensions are similar. Light industry, it'll only change what is a possible use. But to the extent there's some kind of industrial use that would be.
Well, that was put in ages ago to protect the Haggerty
Yeah,
operation, Cohasset
Mhm.
Colonials, and prior to that was boat building.
yeah, and I don't think the
And
Haggerty
there
properties.
is, I mean, that's their property's all been taken over by things like the, you know, CSCR and other structures. I mean, there is no possibility, in my estimation, of light industry returning
Yeah.
to Parker Avenue.
Nor on the marina property, so I think it doesn't hurt anybody to do that.
Are the dimensions in downtown business any different than waterfront business?
I don't believe they are. I don't have it right in front of me. And you'll see the downtown business is going to be eliminated completely when you see the next step to a vestige of the past.
Tom, could you slowly scroll up to this box down here, which is the explanation? Just it proposed for inclusion as it isn't.
I like the word.
You may want to check the syntax there. It's not a zoning issue or anything. It's just you might have left off a verb.
Oh, okay. I just like the
It
word.
is proposed.
I like the word polyglot.
We'll leave that alone. That's a good one. But it is proposed for inclusion. I mean, I
That's
think,
it.
I mean, it's.
No, I just did it. Great. I appreciate that. All right, so that's the harbor. The next one is for the village, is villages. We still have three. So the village was originally the largest downtown business district and it was completely eliminated when the village district was created, whatever it was, 17 years ago, whatever. We still have a downtown business in Beechwood and a small district in West Corner. I have, hold on, let me stop this share for a minute. This is it. We had criticism that the appendices were not in color, and I understand that. We can fix that. But a second, I gotta get rid of this. All right. There's a long appendix that has all the articles that have been consolidated into sections, but I want to get to the ones that have the maps. Jeez. It's really long. Oh, okay. We're going to clean this up. We're going to have just the color map up on the screen for. All right. So that's the harbor. So here's Beechwood. And that is the district. And it extends, going towards Norwell or Situate, I mean. And right here at the end where the arrow is, that's 534 Beechwood. That's the old, whatever it was.
General store.
That we've given a permit for a mixed use. So it already is being developed mixed use, and all of this is residential. Now, I said this at the public hearing the other night. Right now, we're not proposing to change any of the boundaries, just change the name and from DB to village and have it have the same zoning as downtown. But, if somebody came up with amendment, I have the parcel ID for just this parcel and you could take all the rest of it out and just have 534 be the last vestige of commercial zoning there. Everything else is residential. So the chances of anything being developed are slim to none. But the article itself identifies all the parcels that are included in this district. And in West Corner, it's harder to see, but West Corner, this shading here is Residence A and this is Residence B. This is the district up in West Corner. It's the restaurant. It's the corner building that burnt down that's now going to be a Habitat building. I think Charlie Ford, not
Chris Ford.
Chris Ford owns a building in there. And then on the other side of Jerusalem going towards Hull is that little building there, and I think it used to be a fire station, and then you get to the gate, the tide gate for Straits Pond. But I think it's 3 or 4 properties at most. I'd have to go back. But so again, change that. And let me stop the share and go back to the article. Sorry. So again, to get rid of DB once and for all, we would be renaming the village business district to village, and then these are all the parcels in the Beechwood area right here. And then these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's actually 8 in the West Corner, but they're all really tiny. And have them all switch from DB to village. And so they'd have the same requirements as the village does. Again, there's the one project in Beechwood has already been permitted for mixed use. That's the only You know, if somebody else in Beechwood at the moment wants to tear down their houses and build, they could, but, what's the likelihood? And in the west corner, everything is pretty well developed or, you know, difficult to redevelop. So again, this is just really an intent to get rid of downtown business once and for all. Everywhere it exists. So it'd be consolidated in the harbor. It was eliminated in the village a long time ago, and now just eliminate it from West Corner and Beechwood. And again, I think the parcel that is 534 Beechwood is one of these. I think it's this one or this one, 32 or 34. Well, somebody came up in the Florida town meeting and said, eliminate all these others from the district altogether and make them residential. That would be, I wouldn't object. It would be it would be an easy amendment to make.
Dave, you live up in that area, would that,
I'm not suggesting that, but the official
yeah,
article.
but would that cause anxiety in terms of residents?
Historically, there were a couple of people who I think are still owners, who think that being downtown business somehow adds some value to their real estate. So you might hear something.
What about the residential neighbors? Would they,
If they think that, then the village zoning won't affect that. The village zoning will keep whatever value they think we have.
No, I know that. I'm saying if you try to change it to residential only, the people who are, I mean, most of the people who have residences,
Yeah.
you know, prefer having residences and would
Yeah.
prefer, I expect would prefer it to be residential district.
I shouldn't have brought it up at all, but I'm saying somebody may look at this and say, oh, I didn't know I was in downtown business in Beechwood. Maybe I should amend to change all of this. Why should I be a business district? You know, and if somebody came up on the floor and did that, I'm not going to encourage them, but it would be easy to do if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And the one commercial property that's left has recently been permitted for the same type of mixed use in the village.
And currently, is the planning board the permitting authority for both
In the
downtown
village.
business and village district?
No, you're the permitting authority in downtown business and we're
Okay,
the
so
permitting.
this will change that. So that it'll be the planning board.
Yeah, there was somewhere else though, we're gonna add to your workload, don't worry. I'm just kidding. But
Okay,
yeah,
I'm just
or
trying to
not?
clarify.
We'll see.
no, the one thing that wouldn't change in the harbor, you're still the special permit granting authority in the harbor.
I just,
I think this is a.
I mean,
basically-
personally, I think it, you know, zoning boards of appeals should be what they say, boards of appeals, and that all special permits should be with a planning board, but I'm not seeking to change all of that, you know, so the harbor is still gonna be the zoning boards.
I'm not trying to be territorial, but I do,
No,
I am interested to know what actual changes there are. Because people do ask those things.
yeah, you're asking it now, right?
And
That would be the one, this would be the one place in West Corner and in Beechwood where the jurisdiction will change.
And it's more impactful here, I think, than West Corner. But I would think that for every argument you could make that, gee, I own this plot of land that's now in a village district, and that'll enhance my value. It may diminish the value of abutting neighbors. So I don't think it's an easy
And it may not
to
be.
win-lose for
Yeah,
some.
and it may be, and I don't think the village zoning is that much different from the downtown business
No,
zone.
But I think for every, you know, were I a resident and somebody had the opportunity to put a business next to my residential property, my residential neighborhood, I'd probably be concerned. So
Yeah.
I'm sure it would be. So it's not
Well,
a,
that's another reason why we separated these out. So like, if you thought the village was objectionable, I wouldn't want Harbor and 3A to suffer because of an objection to this. So they're all separated out, and if people don't want this change, they don't want this change.
This isn't really gonna be a change. It only would be a change if you try to change it over to residential.
Yeah, Yeah,
And I
that would be,
feel-
that would be a radical change, and we're not proposing it. So we're keeping the boundaries as is, just as the village was done. I mean, there's people now complaining about that the village boundaries were not changed and that, you know, the
Well-
other side of the tracks wasn't made residential, but, you know, the same intent at the time, we didn't want to rock the boat too much, and we kept all the boundaries the same.
Mhm. Well, I will ask around, because there's only about 5 people to ask, and see what the consensus is amongst the residents.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, the parcels are all identified and would be easy to make changes if. So, all right. Those are somewhat of the low hanging fruit. All right, the MBTA thing, you know, when we had a public forum, we're gonna have another forums on all of this, but I don't know if you've been, I get a lot of my information from Judy Barrett, where Lauren Lind went to work, for. And these votes on MBTA communities bylaws have been passing very easily. And I think she reported this morning that Plymouth was 130 something to 6, Abington's sailed through. You know, and a lot of it had to do with publicity, and we are going to publicize this. But when we did our first forum right after the holidays in January, we had 2 people live and 5 and 2 between Zoom and live. This hasn't proven to be controversial as I thought it might be. But
Oh, it gets controversial when somebody stands up at town meeting and starts ranting about something that's not actually happening.
yeah, and if
This-
anybody wants to advocate for what Milton is self-destructively doing, knock them out.
I'm just saying, you have to be prepared
Oh,
to
no, of
make
course
it go
not.
easily, because somebody can screw up the gears in a quick hurry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can reorient this, but.
Well,
So,
I think it behooves us to keep our ear to the ground.
yeah,
And if we hear of examples that are, well, either valid or erroneous, be prepared for those. But I
yeah.
I don't see any problems whatsoever with this
And let me see if I can,
bylaw.
how do I rotate this?
Tom, are we eligible to include the North Situate station, the
Yeah, so
asset
let me take you,
property?
yeah, let me take you through the whole process. So the state, as much as they are doing this one size fits all approach and shoving this all down our throats, they did give us a consultant, and the consultant, you know, did some modeling. And we told them to look at the area on 3A. First of all, we wanted to keep this on commercial property. We didn't want to put this district in residential areas at all. Some of you may recall there was a group who proposed, you know, multifamily housing on North Main Street, and there was a little forum that they held in the library, and like 70 some odd people attended, and it was universal condemnation of the proposal. So we listened to that and we said, no, we're going to do this on 3A. And we did look at North Situate, and if we combine this district with that, we'd be way over our compliance. If we took some of the land from this to shift to North Situate, there was the concern that because of a giant piece of wetlands in this district, the state might not think this is a viable district at all. So we just, at the end of the day, are doing all the compliance within a half mile. That's the circle, by the way, right here is the half mile circle. You have to have more than 50% within a half mile. So it's all within roughly the half mile of the Cohasset station and south of the station. So that's the transportation oriented district, mixed use building. We need this giant piece of wetlands because it all has to connect. You can connect across the street, but we needed that. So our minimum compliance was 43 acres. And at 15 units an acre, which is the density of this law, which is far more than density than anything we have in Cohasset, that leads to the possibility of 638 units. So we had to do 55 acres to include this, but all the wetlands laws still apply. Sewage disposal, wastewater treatment, all of these things still apply. So development feasibility, and that's why I don't know what the state's thinking. Everything around a transportation hub in Eastern Mass is already well developed, so I don't know what they're thinking. It'd be an enormous cost to buy up properties and then tear things down and rebuild. This is Hingham Lumber. That's the store next to it. That's the medical buildings. And then this is that Situate Hill development, which planning board's given out 2 permits in the last 3 years for it, and the current one is being developed. It's like a office and warehouse space for trades related businesses, and they just started construction up there. And that shows that it's 4 assessed parcels, but it actually is 1 ownership, and it's 8 acres. And if there was anything that was possibly redevelopable, that's probably a candidate there. So this is the minimalist compliance. The select board is in favor of, the select board gave us guidance to, to try to take a minimalist approach. There's no consideration for this development and the impact on the highway. Down in the south end of town, the redevelopment of 3A between Beechwood and the Situate line is, I think, 90% complete. It's going to have a new middle lane, a turning lane. But up here, they're only at 60% design or 75% design, so I don't think anybody at DHCD was thinking about all these other impacts, and I don't think there was any coordination with the highway department or anything, but be that as it may, this is what we have to do. And so the consultants have run the numbers with the dimensions that we wanted to set for this. And I'll show you the text of the bylaw in a moment. All of it works. It's gone through a pre-screening at the Attorney General's office, and all they said was add a line to amend your map to create your overlay district. Okay. The technical requirements and whether the formula all works, the numbers of acres we put in, that's someone in housing. Well, DHCD has been renamed, but whatever DHCD is, and we may not get feedback on that until after town meeting, and then the final AG's review. But we did get a preliminary AG review of this, and they said, the text and what we're doing looked fine. So we, and as far as the text goes, we did a rather simplistic approach compared to other towns, like Newton. Newton's is elaborate because they've got, Newton, I think, has to plan for 10,000 units. It's insane, but so the overlay district, so we decided, we have the option of creating it as an overlay district, and we decided to do that to, not turn it all residential and grandfather, so make what's there non-conforming, but perhaps to maintain our commercial development since we need a commercial tax base. So we create the overlay district. Those are the properties that are in it. It's 14 assessed parcels, but as I said, Situate Hill Road, those 4 are all actually in single ownership.
How come the Frank Williams landscape property's not on there?
Because we didn't go in that direction towards him. We could get into more wetlands that way. We went south.
That is south of the station.
It's actually kind of across the street from it, but we didn't need to put it in again. And the bare minimalist approach, what they came up with.
Okay.
And not a big deal, but you've got 132 CJC highway in with 2 parcels, but it's 1 address, but 2 parcels of.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
And so you create the overlay, so then you have to amend Article 3 to create your new table. So that would be this, and from the previous article, the transportation overlay is gone, so this is what the new overlay list would look like. The three remaining that we have, plus we'd add this one. Then we do have to add some text to the bylaw, and that would become, the village provisions and the reorganization be moved into new section 4.6. This would become 4.7. And it doesn't say a lot. It just basically says, we're doing this in compliance with the state law, and the state law is 48 now, section 3A. And unlike 40B, 3A is only like 2 sentences. It's actually very short. It's these guidelines with all this other stuff and these requirements on. At one point, you know, the original draft I did mention 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. The consultant said, take that out because we can't in any way constrict the number of bedrooms. It's supposed to encourage family use. So, you know, we could get 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms in this place, in these places. And then, since it's an overlay, the underlying zoning still applies. It can be made subject to site plan review. Oh, that reminds me. Somewhere, oh, and then we say, somebody on the bylaw committee wanted a specific reference to the stormwater management, but we also need to add the inclusionary zoning, unless that's somewhere else buried in here, but we can apply inclusionary zoning to this to keep pace with 40B. 40B still exists. And if you remember in 40B, you guys negotiated down to 2 bedrooms in each unit. We can't do that. But we will, you know, you're still subject to, you know, it's unlike the one-stop shopping of 40B to your board. This would still have to go to planning board for site plan review, Concom for wetlands issues and stormwater issues. It'll still have to go to the Board of Public Health or the Sewer Commission, depending on whatever they do. So, you know,
So Tom, at this point, I got a little confused with E, that's fine. And then it's the labeling, and now we go from E to C, which is a
I'm sorry.
table.
Yeah, no, I know.
E is a
Well,
table.
E is,
Do those tables
Oh, no,
belong
no,
under
no,
C
no,
and
no.
D, or
well, the distinction, no, the distinction is what's in the font that I used. So the article has part A, identify the parcels. Part B,
okay.
you know, and then there's text. The text is in this Calibri type. So step 2 of the article is to create the section 4.7, and that 4.7 consists of A, B, C, E. Step 3, which is C, and going back to Times New Roman, is to
Oh, okay,
create.
so
to
it
create-
won't
yeah,
show up in the printed bylaws.
It will, no, it won't be. in the
Yeah, okay, no, I didn't
And so
understand.
then with the tables, rather than mess with the tables we just amended last fall, we just add a separate table at the end for both the dimensional table and the use table. So we can encourage mixed use. We can't mandate mixed use, so we are trying to encourage it, but that's all we can do. And again, I have to mention. I guess got to review all the text and make sure inclusionary zoning is in. And then the dimensions, so this is what the dimensions would look like. It's 15 units an acre, which is the state mandate. And then we set these frontages and a green strip where it's on 3A, setbacks, height, lot coverage, lot clearing, you know, which is similar to what happens in business district. And the floor area ratio follows the village. So
Tom, does the
using these numbers, and by the way, the parking is dealt with in the amendments to Article 7. And when we get to that, I'll show it to you, but we've decided in following what Hingham is doing, it's going to be 1.5 spaces per unit. And so UTIL is the name of the consultant company. They said none of that affects their model, so it still leaves 43 acres with these parcels with all of these dimensions built in. That has to be verified by people at DHCD at some point.
Tom, I just have a question about the interplay or between density, maximum density of 15 units and a minimum frontage of 75 feet.
Yeah.
Should there be here any driveway or access specifications just to be sure, I mean, 75 feet of frontage can go pretty quickly if each of the 15 well, it wouldn't happen, but each of,
No,
8 or
I'm,
9
I'm
units.
I'm thinking anything that would be developed would have a single access point with the 75 feet. Well, I'll just be cautious as we mess with any of these numbers. I have to go back to UTO and make sure the formulas still work and the land area still works. If we mess with it too much,
Well,
they could say, well, you need to put 50 acres in this now.
but I wouldn't, I mean, there must be a way that you could throw out, well, I mean, if it makes sense, and it may not make sense, what I'm suggesting. I don't have a number or different numbers. I'm just wondering if 75 feet of frontage serving 15 units needs some sort of access or driveway specifications, not to cut down on the frontage per se, but I mean, you wouldn't want, let's assume everything's 2-story, so you've got 8 or 7 units, but even 7 into 75 feet of frontage gives you 10 feet of access. I mean, I know people wouldn't probably do that, but
Let's just go back for a moment and look at what's there. So if the TOD site was redeveloped where the arrow is, that has 75 feet of frontage of it.
and how many
Hardwood.
units are there? I've never counted them. Well, they're
Right
probably a
now?
lot.
That has 20.
So they're served by a common driveway, basically.
Yeah. They're served by a common driveway, so is the hardware store.
I'm
And
just wondering if there's
if
some way
this site-
you'd
if
want to
this-
specify, but you could do
Well,
it in a
I would,
hearing.
I would
You could
suggest,
do that in a hearing.
yeah, we could do that in site plan review because traffic and circulation is one of the site plan review issues.
Okay, I mean, it's not a huge thing, but I
I
just.
don't think there's any property that would run into a problem here. This one, here is probably not available to be redeveloped at all. It's too small. You'd have to string it together with, you couldn't even, you can't string it together with this one. So this one's probably protected from any redevelopment. This can't
So
be.
you would administratively approve a plan that made sense from an access standpoint with.
Yeah, we'd have to
driveway,
yeah.
all that.
The
So you
planning
don't
board
need to
would
put
have,
the specs in here. Okay,
the planning board would have to do that as part of site plan.
all right, I'd withdraw my concern then.
So this was the thing, so this is the 5th step in the article is to change the map. That was what the state AG's office told us to do. So, and the explanation, the box here, let's see. That kind of explains what has to be done. So actually, it's it. Change this. So
Any board questions or issues or concerns or?
I gotta do this.
Okay,
In this thing where it says all applicable general and zoning bylaws of the town, I think we should just, if we're specifically mentioning stormwater, I think we should specifically mention inclusionary zoning too. I'll just add that.
okay.
All right. So then the next article is parking, and this is where the select board had a lot of input, and I can tell you that there seems to be a sentiment on the select board, and I said this at the public hearing last week, to really curb development in the village. And, we all know there's parking issues in the village by the restaurants and the hospitalities, not by the residences, but nevertheless, in the parking regs, the target is the residential parking spaces. But there were a number of places. So the first thing we did organizationally here is that the table that we had in the old bylaw, referred to various uses and various number of spaces per unit. We've just changed the table to conform to the new Article 4 table we passed last fall. So all the uses and terminology, in the interest of space, I have grouped a lot of them together, ones that would have similar parking requirements, but the whole table now is meant to match the new Article 4 table of uses. So that's the organizational housekeeping part of it. And that's what it says here, corresponds to the uses listed in 4.2D. Now, there were a number of places in our existing, and then I just took all the requirements that are in our current bylaw and just moved them into the appropriate place. In a number of places, we had the word sufficient parking, and Carolyn Murray suggested we get rid of that. And, you know, in something like, you know, we talked about this in the bylaw committee, and we're keeping it in some places like an open air use like this first one. But the childcare facility said that. So the childcare facility we actually changed to have a standard, since it's the employees who have customers come and go, we basically created an employee thing. And the word minimum of, Clark suggested adding that the other night. So that's just any place where we have a space per so many square feet. We just added the words minimum of. But the big change was here. So again, the multiple families in 3A and Harbor don't really apply because there aren't any, but it's the village, and the current requirement in the village is one, for the residential uses, is one space per unit. And everything that the planning board has permitted in the village, certainly since I'm on the board in the village, has had on-site parking for the residences. It's not the problem for the town parking lot. I've argued with the selectmen at 2 or 3 meetings that say it's for both the harbor and the village. It's a space problem. We don't have space and we need more parking space. It's not a zoning problem. But be that as it may, they wanted it to be one space per bedroom. And, you know, you can, as we did at the public hearing, you can, or at our zoning bylaw committee meeting, you can speculate why there's all this opposition to the village, but amongst the select board, but there is. So they wanted 2 things. They wanted this change to one space per bedroom. And then this language here is the one place in the bylaw where the planning board has the power of waiving something. You know, we get people and you do too, you know, waive this in the bylaw, waive that in the bylaw. And I constantly make the point that we don't have the power to just waive something, but this was one place that we did. And in the village zoning, and that's existed since the village zoning came into place. So they wanted us to get rid of that too. And they wanted one space per bedroom and then get rid of the power of any waiver. So Mike can back me up on this. And the bylaw committee meeting last week, or no, Monday, no, last week, yeah, before the planning board hearing, we said no. And, you know, so we've compromised with them, or we think we've compromised with them on 1.5 spaces per unit, which is now mirroring what we are going to do with the MBTA district, and keeping the waiver power. In the planning board, that if a particular site 1.5 doesn't make any sense, so it's not necessary, that we'd have the power to waive that.
What happened if somebody, a developer, wanted to build a dwelling for a 3-bedroom unit? They would still be required to have, or not be required to have more than 1.5?
No, it would be
Parking.
1.5. Yeah, yeah, and I don't think you'll in the
Well,
pattern.
yeah, I know what you're saying, but
No, in the pattern of what we're seeing being developed in the village, we're not seeing 3 bedrooms at all. There's no space for it. But you think about a 3-bedroom, the 3rd bedroom would probably be for children, or 2 of the 3 bedrooms would probably be for children. It would be a family type of unit. And that may be an issue, you know, up in the MBTA district, because we're doing 1.5 per unit, and there will be 3-bedroom units if anything gets developed. You know, I haven't heard any, you know, I haven't had a formal meeting with the select board since bylaw committee pushed back on this, but or it was the planning board pushed back on this public hearing. So, you know, that's where we are, but, you know, there's a strong sentiment amongst the select board of curbing village development now. And this may, if you need more space for on-site parking for residences, it may curb some development, but We also been looking around the village and what's left to develop. There isn't much other than, Main Street, both sides of Main Street was torn down and redeveloped.
But I mean,
There isn't much left. I mean, Smith Place is the only place that's left, but
Yeah.
when One Pleasant was permitted, we took away the easement rights for Smith Place. So,
if there were a 2-bedroom condo, or there are and will be, presumably, the two people, spouses or whomever, significant others, would have separate jobs and separate vehicles.
Yep.
I mean, that'd be basic. I would agree with you that if there was for some reason a third bedroom, it's most likely to be child oriented and they're not gonna be driving cars, but 1.5 may be kind of cutting it a little thin.
well, the gas station project that we permitted had 18 spaces for 12 units. So it actually met this requirement, even though the requirement didn't exist. I don't think it's a giant burden, but again, I'm okay with doing this, but again, because there's not a lot left to develop in the village, unless there's massive tear downs and rebuilds, but when you have a rebuild, you can probably accommodate this stuff on site, but I don't, I'm willing to compromise.
but
with the
these are
select
in,
board, but I'm not willing to go, I think they want something draconian that would really put a kibosh on all redevelopment in the village, and that wasn't, and I tried to remind the ones, since they're all new, is what the reason for this bylaw was 20 years ago, when the village was a little more moribund, and we're trying to give economic value to property owners by creating mixed use, and we wouldn't want to necessarily kill it. It's not the problem for their parking problem.
but if I'm in the village, within 500 feet of the town parking lot still prevails, still
Yep.
applies rather.
Yeah, no, that's
So
for
if
the,
there's any
that's
new
for,
development, I mean, that parking areas,
yeah,
everybody.
but that's the commercial development, because this is specifically for the dwellings. So the dwellings are on site and they have been on site for.
Okay, so they would have to be specified, reserved. They couldn't take advantage of I can walk less than 500 feet to the
Yeah.
town parking lot unless it's a commercial. Okay.
Yeah, and then, so the other thing is the restaurants.
I like to, finally, you have
Well,
one
yeah,
for four.
so-
I'm not sure that's enough. but
Well,
one for four
well,
is better
again,
than one for nothing,
Again, I don't know that I don't think I've met with you, but I might have heard me say this to the bylaw committee, and I've certainly said it to the selectmen and the planning board. You got us on to looking at this, and I looked at Hingham, and they have an employee parking requirement for hotels, but I don't even know if they have any hotels anymore. I looked at Norwell. I looked at Braintree, which has a lot of commercial development, and none of them have any employee parking requirements. So Carolyn threw in this part at the end. She heard your comments because I had reported them in various memos, and so she added this. But again, the problem is that we don't have the space. If we start the village, I don't know if we can get another restaurant in the village. We're going to have restaurants in the harbor, but Atlantica is permitted already, and hotel condo project is already permitted, so they're not going to be concerned. But I don't know, I don't know that there's any new restaurants that this would be a deterrent to. But again, it just points out that we have a space problem, not a zoning problem.
Exactly.
And I've suggested to them that they have to, in the village, there is space. It's on ledge and it would require some work, but it's behind the teen center and between the teen center and the tracks. That I remember being told once we could get another 100 spaces up there. Or they're going to have to deck the village, but nobody wants to face that. But, the village is pretty vibrant now with all the, yes, and it's being driven by the hospitality uses. And I think that's a good sign compared to what it was 20 years ago when we put this bylaw in place.
I'd like to ask my colleagues how they feel. I feel this is a work in progress that I would be not shocked at all if after this goes through in 5 or 10 years, that people say this is untenable and we have to adjust the bylaw.
Okay.
Even if that impacts future commercial development. But I don't know, how do my colleagues feel about this parking issue? Particularly with employees, I'm, you know,
And again, I think, just remember that looking at other towns, including the big ones with big commercial areas, nobody's regulating employees as a separate issue. I think that's built into the requirements when they say so many.
well, it
People
also may be
space.
built into the physical configurations. I mean, I've gone to Braintree recently in Weymouth, and there's a lot of on-street parking spaces as well as
Yeah.
off-street, and, you know.
And we have an opportunity to increase on-street spaces in the harbor, and they won't do it, so. Yeah. You have it
Anyway,
both ways.
how do
You
my,
have it
how
both
do,
ways,
how do my colleagues feel on this one?
My view is you're never gonna solve it, and you're never gonna please people. It's unsolvable, and there's always gonna be someone that's gonna be PO'd. So, sounds as if the select board kind of wants to have it a certain way, and they're the bosses. So my feeling is kind of take their thoughts into consideration and try and appease them.
Yeah, and again, we're not caving to them, but we're compromising. That's the way we're looking at it, so.
Could you go back up to 7.2?
Yeah, I was just pointing, 7.4 is new because the judge moved some things around and then. we
Oh, no,
had-
that's
But that's, anyway, 7.2.
0.2L.
Yeah, 7.2.
7.2L, I had a kind of a concern with, which is, wait, you go, okay, except for common driveways. If you go to that last phrase, or the permitted setback distance for a main or accessory dwelling, presumably if lesser, I know of nothing in town where the setback for a main or accessory building is less than 5 feet. If that doesn't add anything, why not just delete it as a?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, not reinventing the wheel. This is in the existing bylaw and has been there forever.
Oh, yeah, but it makes no sense. I don't know of anything that has a 2-foot setback
Right, well,
to make, or even a 4-foot setback. And it kind of gets a little, I mean, it's just extra words. It's not,
yeah,
it never
Well,
would
you
or
can leave
could
it-
be applied, but I don't think you'd have any weeping and wailing if that were deleted.
no, I mean, just procedurally now, all the articles except the last two that we'll get to have been recommended by the planning board and subject to the public hearing. We're still continuing the public hearing for tomorrow night to
All
deal
right,
with.
but you
I
could
mean,
throw
if,
this in it's really a housekeeping. It's not.
yeah, I mean, if you threw up an amendment at the town meeting, I can find out if we can.
I wouldn't want to do an amendment at town meeting. I mean, that's just an invitation to chaos.
Yeah, all right. Well, and I don't know that we can, reopen.
Why
the
don't you
public
think
hearing.
about it? Just think about it and see if you
I'll
can
find
get
out.
a select person or whatever to
No, I just gotta find out from
join
from
hands.
Carolyn if we can reopen the public hearing tomorrow night to just to be.
Okay, more as a housekeeping, but if not, I mean, it's been in there for 30 years or 40 years, so.
So everything
Who
else
cares?
everything else is the same, but moved around somewhat. The judge did some housekeeping. This article had never been subjected to housekeeping or in the previous town meeting. But we did, on the issue of access, the judge created the section, which I was pleased to see, because the planning board has been discussing, having regulations about some access for quite some time based on a Plymouth bylaw. And we haven't passed anything. We were gonna do it as regulations, but so we're kind of just stating some of the obvious. And then we just created this, presumption for A&Rs, since we deal with A&Rs all the time, and have had some issues with the adequacy of the road, particularly.
What does that phrase mean? That adequacy of
Approval
access
not-
will be presumed.
Approval not required is what A&R means, and it's a
Well,
form
I
of.
know that, but
Yeah, so, the
I
road,
wouldn't want somebody to misconstrue that phrase into
What
thinking that, that means I don't have to have, legal frontage on a way or a road.
oh, no, it's not
Because,
intended.
obviously 40A, whatever it is.
No, we're not
3 or
intending to
4 says-
override anything. All we're just saying is we're gonna make a presumption of adequacy in certain circumstances that can be overcome on a case-by-case basis. It just takes away one more issue.
Well, on purpose of an approval, it doesn't say on a
Mm.
grant of approval, it just says if I'm applying for approval, it's presumed that I have adequacy of access and that can't be challenged, maybe. I'm not sure. But,
Well, it's still giving the planning board discretion and then the fire department weighing in.
okay,
And then this next subsection makes sure that none of the other A&R stuff is.
okay, as long as somebody doesn't misconstrue that to mean
No,
a
no.
waiver of frontage.
But, on Black Horse Lane, we were originally faced with a roadway a pavement that's 12 feet wide.
Right, and it
They
constricts
wanted to
8
treat it as
feet
a
at
common
one point.
driveway, and we said no, and, we eventually forced
Yeah.
them into a subdivision, and the road.
Which is
pavement-
what it should have, they should have
Yeah,
applied for.
and the pavement, and we
years
still
earlier.
gave, and we still gave them, on the subdivision rules, we can do many more waivers, and we gave them a waiver, and I think the pavement is gonna be 18 feet.
That's okay. I mean, at
We're
least
also, by the way, we're
it's
gonna
safe
see our
and
first,
adequate.
we're
Yeah.
gonna see our first large home review on that. The house
Okay.
that has, the house that
Okay,
has.
just as long as Tom just doesn't
Yeah,
get
no, I'm sorry,
misconstrued.
if you're
Uh,
curious, but, all right, so then going onward. Let me see, let me just make it.
This is the border zoning.
Yeah, so this was suggested to me at one point. We have border zoning on the, between the residential and 3A commercial districts, and it's rather large, it's 100 feet or something, so. Originally, this would be lines in the table, and adding to the table, the judge said, no, don't do it as a change in the table, just add a new subsection to the 5.4, rather than mess with the table. I agree. So this will create a strip of 25 feet at the places where the village and the harbor would abut a residential property on the side or rear lot line. I don't think it happens in the harbor much at all. I think only really where the Legion would abut a property next door, and where the new building that's going up as part of the hotel project that's on Elm Street abuts the residential property on Elm Street. Those would be the only two places, and the hotel one is being built under the old rules, so. It's great, basically to create a step back effect from the residential boundary line. And Clark pointed out that, well, you could build a house, on the residential side, you could build it up to 35 feet up to the setback limit, and yet on the other side, on the commercial side, you're saying it can only be 28 feet. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, there's not too many houses though, unless again, they're tear downs that we're seeing are actually 35 feet, so. It was done at the request originally of an abutter, to the village, and, it's to create a step back effect, so you don't have a looming large 35-foot tall building right up on your property line.
So to the board, do you think this is reasonable and fair, or is it an infringement of property rights, or?
And it's not that. By the way, your members of the select board said, why don't we have the same limits that are on 3A and residential? And I said, there's no space for that. You couldn't impose 100-foot setback in the village or the harbor. And again, that goes with, I think, a sentiment of curbing.
Yeah.
redevelop-
But I'd like to hear from Dave and others, Dave, points of view on this.
Well, it's pretty limited. Very limited number of properties that would be affected.
Right. Yeah.
And I think the residential zone should have some I don't know, aesthetic preference and not have anything that's, massive or outsized close to their property lines. I kind of like this whole concept.
Matt, how do you feel? Charlie?
Yeah, I'm just thinking through the locations that would be applicable. Yeah, I mean, similar to Dave, I think if I was living in that area, I'd want some sort of relief. I can see how some people might interpret, hey, if you can go 35 feet everywhere else, why the discrimination at 28? But I think most people could wrap their head around the
Yeah.
fact that's being done to, create a more harmonious
Oh, view,
It's a different
space, light.
quality of building, the commercial building at 35 feet versus a residential at 35. And none of the residential buildings, I think, that abut the village are 35 feet, by the way. They'd have to be torn down and rebuilt. But it's a different quality of construction and building between commercial and residential. right? So-
But it's all after you got past a 25-foot line, you could step it up from 28 to 35.
Correct. Right, it's just to create a sort of a step back effect in a few isolated locations.
I also think it's difficult, or it may be not a trap, but it may be misleading to take a look at all the structures that exist today and say they will never change. Some of them could burn down. Somebody could
Yep.
decide that I want to build a different kind of structure there, in which case this bylaw would take effect, even if it were to replace a 35-foot, prior structure. I don't think that would be necessarily grandfathered.
Right.
So, to my mind, this makes sense for the future. There may not be anything kind of in front of us, either of our boards, in the next couple of years, but you never know. So I think this is a good,
Yeah,
good,
and-
if. Charlie? No. Okay,
Okay,
let's move on then.
all right, so the next one,
68.
yeah, so meantime, everything 1 through 7, the planning board has recommended 4-0 last week. This is the one, we're gonna deal with this one, and we're gonna deal with large home review. I'll just switch, the only thing with large home review, and I know Woody, you made some other comments about large home review, we're not trying to wholesale change it. The original proposal and what was put for the public notice was eliminating large home review, but after further discussion in the bylaw committee, we can switch to FAR and still have large home review. So,
Yeah, but I think this is
So we have-
misstated. If you wanna have the trigger or the threshold is 4,000 square feet,
yeah,
the first bullet is exempted from that. So you've got to, so you want to say no building permit may issue for a structure that exceeds the greater 4,000 square feet and then you've got two conditions. But the way the first bullet is phrased in my
well,
mind,
again, I'm just superimposing changes on the existing text without getting into a large rewrite.
well, I'll tell you what this says is that any building permit for a dwelling whatsoever has to come before the board as a large home review, even if it's a small home.
Oh, I see. what you're saying.
2,000 square foot house
No, I see what you're saying. Well, that's a
would
flaw.
have to, would
Yeah,
have to
that's a
come.
flaw in the existing bylaw, so, all
But
right.
it can be, it's easily changed.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
like
okay.
The threshold is 4,000 feet up in that introductory paragraph, and then you deal with these two situations, and it's, you know, I mean, there
Yeah.
isn't a person in the world that would object to that, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's, so, you know,
And you don't want to deal with,
there's
you
no-
don't want to deal with 2,000 square foot houses.
No, no, and that, again, this is how the current bylaw reads, so it's a flaw in that as well. Anyway, I'll fix that, but
That's
so
a-
that,
that's a
we just didn't get to the vote because
Okay,
you know,
well, all right,
the
it's not a
consensus,
big deal.
yeah, no, the consensus is to keep large home review, so essentially the house is 4,000 square feet, if, you know, the FAR calculation, if FAR is brought in, the FAR calculation yields a house that's 4,000 square feet. There'll be a site plan review under large home
Right.
review by the planning board. And then we get into the FAR and whether, you know, where do we get the variances or special permits, and that's a point of contention. But,
Okay, that was
but anyways, so
Yeah.
for this, it's to switch us to, and I had circulated a memo and it was based on, I used numbers that I didn't double check that the bylaw group had developed in 2021, but we, you know, if we have 20% lot coverage and it's two-dimensional, so that's a lot. And we just had a large home review on a property on Sawyer Street, and it's Residence B, but it was a 55,000 square foot lot. And it's a house that's a little over 5,000 square feet. The architect, as most of them are doing, are putting FAR on the plans, even though we don't ask for it. And it was a 0.10. But on 20% lot coverage with the 55,000 square foot lot, they could have had an 11,000 square foot footprint. And then if you go up 2 and 3 stories, 2.5 to 3 stories, that's a large house. Our current zoning with the 20% footprint can lead to a lot of really massive development that I don't think we want. And the data that the bylaw working group had come up with is that other than the very smallest of lots in all 3 districts, we do not approach 20% lot coverage anyway.
but you do in small lots, but I'm.
Very small lots we do. very small
And
lots.
these are the people who may need relief, but basically, let's start at the.
Well,
up-
so anyway, I just want to
up a
tell you.
level. Why
let
are
me
you
just-
calling this primary structure? The way the bylaw really reads now, it's any building or structure that's impervious, including accessory structures, and now you're saying it's primary only and hardscape. And I don't understand why you'd want to eliminate.
Well, lot coverage, the definition of lot coverage would be this, which would
Yeah, but
include.
why is it titled primary structure and hardscape?
Just because I was just thinking in terms of the house, because I think our current bylaw refers to it that way.
Well, our
not
current
using the word-
bylaw refers to buildings, which is.
All right,
It doesn't refer to primary dwelling at all. It refers to buildings. And which can include a lot of different things.
I know, but then
structures.
the definition of lot coverage would include exactly what it would have accessory structures within.
And if hardscape, yeah, but also you talk about hardscape somewhere in here about, right here, hardscape, pervious or impervious. Our bylaw deals with impervious. If you have a deck where the water can, flow through and things like that, that's presently not part of lot coverage. So you're changing the meaning of the bylaw. It may be your intention to do so, but I think this is a substantive.
The intention is to encourage more green and landscaping and stuff.
Well, pervious is already encouraged because they're exempted from basically lot coverage. If it's pervious, crushed gravel, Now, crushed gravel driveway, which we have deemed is good, is now going to be part of lot coverage.
Yeah.
And if I have a crushed gravel, we have a situation in Stockbridge Street where you know, small house, small lot, obviously, they all are. They're taking a macadam driveway out and putting in crushed gravel. At this point, with this definition, that wouldn't matter. They wouldn't be impacting lot coverage whatsoever.
No, because it's
though-
not, because it's not green. That's why.
But it's pervious.
But that doesn't
Water
matter.
is able-
Nothing's growing there.
Well,
Nothing's
why
gonna
is it, why is that important as opposed to water absorption in the land? I've got of all the things you've done, it's been marvelous. I'd give you an A+ with one exception, and I think this
All
is
right, and then,
a real problem.
we'll bring it up on our public hearing tomorrow, and we can change that.
Yeah, but I don't know if I could be whistling in the dark here, but,
Well, anyway, let me just first explain the numbers where they come from, so. So, and then this is where Clark objects, and Clark's written a memo that I haven't even had a chance to read yet to counter this. Clark is against this.
against the numbers or the.
He's against he's against the idea of going to FAR. You know, FAR is
Okay.
a trend, and I spoke, you know, Merrill Engineering, they're in my building. I spoke to one of their engineers, one who doesn't appear in Cohasset ever. And he said, yeah, the bigger towns have this. Brookline, Newton. Brookline has a 0.3 FAR because it's urban development. We would probably be the first or one of the first small towns to do this, and I have no problem being the first. So, you know, I think that's just a false objection that Clark is making. But let me just tell you where these numbers come from. So from the data that we gathered, you take the average house size in each of the 3 districts over the minimum lot size required, this is what you come up with. So these numbers reflect our current development patterns to date, at least through 2021, of the average house size. Now, Clark is arguing we should apply it to the average lot size, but no, those would be non-conforming already. You couldn't just automatically build on them without permit from you guys. It should be made, you know, the town in its wisdom in '86, the last time this was looked at in any detail, it set 18,000, 35,000, and 60,000. So this is what the numbers come out at. Now, Clark has pointed out that in RA, that still means that that's close to the 20% lot coverage, and yes, it is, because that's what the averages in RA to date reflect. And, you know, so might want to change that number for future RA development. But 20% under our current bylaw can yield a really, really big house. So you want to again, we haven't developed to 20%, but I think if your board isn't experiencing it, the planning board is certainly experiencing that all the new development we're seeing, everybody is pushing the limits of every dimension that they can, height, setback, everything. The trend is in that direction to go large, large, large. And this is what the averages of our development to date looks like. And yes, RA has the largest lot coverage by their buildings, much larger than the other 2. That new house on Sawyer Street we just had was a 0.10. This would be, it could go to 0.12 under these numbers. RC is this. I also, you know, there's a 10,000 square foot house going up on Little Harbor. I have to check what the footprint of that one was, but it's a 57,000 square foot lot. So I don't know what its lot coverage would work out to, what its FAR would work out to. I can check that, but so all we're doing basically with this is incorporating our current development patterns to date on house size. Now, this part that's highlighted in yellow to give what some would argue would be flexibility, we thought we'll put in the process, and this was originally proposed by me in, you know, in conjunction with the elimination of large home review, but to create a little fudge factor here that if you could go 110% of FAR, you could do it by special permit rather than a variance. And then last week at the bylaw committee meeting, we got into maybe making a distinction between new construction and those projects that will come under your authority under Article 8. But Judge pointed out that's not what was in the public notice, so we can't discuss that quite yet. But the select board does not want us to do this part here. They don't want us to do a fudge factor for a special permit. Their argument is, and it's a valid argument, that if you allow 110% of FAR, people will take 110% of FAR. Even though it would be a special permit standard as opposed to as of right. The select board is advocating we get rid of this paragraph and just have the hard limit of these numbers, or whatever the numbers should be, and anything above that is a variance. So two things going on is get rid of the 20% footprint coverage because of the potential threat that represents, and incorporate our average development patterns to date, basically freezing those numbers by creating an FAR. Of course, you could always amend FAR in the future. And then because these are far less than the 20% coverage that we currently have, correspondingly, we thought the coverage of everything on, you know, however we define hardscapes should be decreased from 30% to 25%. We just thought it, you know, the current numbers are 20% for the buildings and 30% for everything else that's impervious.
Well, you
If
say
we-
buildings, Tom. I mean, I don't have.
I forget the
I-
word primary structure. I'll change whatever needs to be changed.
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's.
the current numbers are this: the buildings 20%, everything else that's impervious is 30%. If we're switching the buildings to these numbers, to these lows, well under 20%, then we thought we should correspondingly lower this number to 25%.
So people
It
who now.
encourages more green space on lots.
Well,
Yes,
I don't know where I thought the purpose, if you go back in some of the literature, was not green space as much as it was groundwater absorption. And
Which is the benefit of having lawn or green space.
but it doesn't necessarily. Let's say I live in Cape Cod and Chatham and have a clamshell driveway. That's pervious. But
All right, Woody,
according to this,
that's a different argument than if we take that out, if we take out the pervious materials, you know, which is this here, and I'm gonna just highlight it. you know. So nevertheless, by lowering this number, lowering the 20%, we think you still should have a corresponding lowering of this number.
well, perhaps, but the other problem I have is that your use of the word primary structure. If I wanted to game the system, I'd build a house and I would build accessory. I would build a detached garage. I would have other accessory buildings that would be exempt from any lot coverage issue.
No, then they would fall under this. Because of the.
Structure, no, but these aren't primary structures. These are.
Yeah, but all right, you know what, I just have to sync my definitions, but the definition of lot coverage includes accessory structures, so they would be included. It's just a matter of wordsmithing it to make it all consistent. That's not. We're focusing on a side issue with all due respect. The fight I'm going to have with the
I
planning
could
board
game
tomorrow
the
night is
system, Tom.
this.
I could game the system. The way we define buildings today is anything with a roof that prevents the water from going in, and that applies to, that's
Okay, that's
20%.
fine, and if the floor
It's
area
not a
ratio-
dwelling.
if the floor area ratio applies to buildings, then it's going to, it's going to include accessory structures. It's going to squeeze houses themselves a little more. I can already anticipate by listening to Clark what the arguments are going to be at town meeting. When this was tangentially mentioned at the last town meeting at 11 something at night, somebody from the school committee got up and said, oh, you're going to restrict house sizes and property rights, and I'm going to hear all this.
But why are
nonsense
you
about-
reducing coverage? Forget building coverage,
Because
but
because
lot
the
coverage from 30 to 25%. That's a substantive change.
Yeah,
Particularly if you have a small
because
lot.
so is this. Switching from 20% coverage to these percentages is a significant change.
Is it a significant reduction?
Yes, 20% versus 17%, 12%, 9%.
Well, I don't think coverage it can be exactly equated to floor area ratio, can it?
Floor area ratio is a simple
I know it's
mathematical.
three-dimensional and all that good stuff, but
It's size of the square footage of the building over the lot area. That's what it is. It's a simple equation, so it yields a percentage like this.
if it does, it
We're
does.
getting away from, the whole idea is to get away from the footprint because it's not accounting for three dimensions.
I've really, let me just finish with one sentence, and I really do want to turn it over to the board. I'm not opposed to floor area ratios. What I'm opposed to is reducing the coverage percentages in absolute terms from where they are today, particularly as they might affect smaller landowners. I mean, if I'm in the RC district with 2 acres of land, it's irrelevant. I couldn't possibly build a house that's 20,000. Well, I could, but a 20 or 25,000 square foot house footprint. I mean, that's ridiculous. But if I'm up in the hillside, going from 30 to 25, I'm on Pleasant Street. This is going to be a big problem. And this is where it's the only place in all that you've done where I personally sort of take a left turn here.
Yeah, but you're worried about this stuff: pools, tennis courts, driveways.
Well,
I mean, if the buildings are being reduced in size, why shouldn't there be a corresponding reduction of all of the impervious material that is allowed on a site?
I would turn it around
I
and say,
get your point
why
about the
not?
pervious. Forget the pervious part of it right now.
Yeah, but why should that be reduced? Why
Why
should
shouldn't it be reduced?
Because there are amenities, there are people that are constrained in terms of small lot sizes and things. But if you put in an in-ground pool or a tennis court, it's not particularly offensive in my estimation. It's not like a building. Those are structures, but they're not buildings. You won't see them, but I don't know. Let me ask the zoning board. I mean, it's my colleagues here.
All right, and
I've said more than enough.
you're welcome to appear tomorrow night and make this argument, but I will assure you I'll make the argument for you. I'll point it out. So
Oh, I'm sure you would. I'm sure you'll be fair, but I just want to hear about from the points of view of my colleagues, because this is a zoning board meeting. Dave, why don't you lead off as our vice chair? And
I think we're getting a little bit caught up with numbers here. The whole concept in the town with coverage, with lot coverage, it's basically said, we want to see at least a maximum of 70%, or we want to see a minimum of 70% of the lot not covered by pervious materials, right?
right.
yeah, we have a lot clearing limit and we have a coverage limit.
Okay, but you could have a 500 square foot house and still cover 30% of the lot with pervious materials. And that's, the town has made the determination that that's a reasonable thing to do. It's
Okay.
reasonable to have 70% of the lot uncovered.
Mhm.
Just because you're building a smaller house, it doesn't feel right to me to change the lot coverage. I mean, you're not actually building a smaller house. You're limiting, you're creating a different maximum size of house.
Right.
But as you know, it's been pointed out, swimming pools, tennis courts, pickleball courts, shuffleboard, you know, all of our boomer pastimes cover ground. But I don't see any reason to limit it further than what the town has already limited it.
Okay. That's fair enough, and it's a fair explanation of it. It's fine.
Yeah, I think the understanding of FAR to the public's gonna be, you'll have a challenge, right, in trying to explain this at the public forum, and I think ultimately, you know, this probably won't surprise you, right, that people are gonna look at it as, you know, they're gonna take a quick look and say, so right now I'm allowed 20% coverage in this district, you're proposing to limit it to 9. That's
Right.
you know, that you're trying to squeeze our property rights and it's gonna kind of go off the rails.
Well,
It's kind of what I'm just kind of saying.
No,
from a
I
general
know
public
what, I know what the arguments are going to be, but it's also, anybody who's listened to me for the last 20 years knows that that property rights argument is a bunch of BS, frankly, because zoning is constitutional. A community has the right to decide how its development is going to proceed. And I didn't come up with overly restrictive numbers. I've come up with numbers that our own data shows to be the case.
But you know, this,
What we are doing is cutting off the possibility of somebody going to the 20% footprint. Because when you multiply that by 2.5 or 3 floors, you have something massive. There's just logical limits to two-dimensional zoning. And it was back when there was a citizens petition in 17. What do you remember? It was Peter Godica who brought up the term proportional zoning. That's what we were
you know, Tom, you
shooting
could
for,
have
and that's what
both,
this is.
you could have both lot coverage, structural coverage, as well as FAR. If you know, FAR is concerned with volume, and we are, as a zoning board, very concerned with volume. We deal with cubic feet within a setback and this sort of thing, volumetric increases. But we also deal with people that have 5,000, 6,000 square foot lots that are not building anything offensive at all. But if we're concerned about volume, deal with volume, but don't preclude a tennis court or a swimming pool.
No, that fine, Woody. I'm almost convinced that to avoid the argument, I'd keep the 30% number. But the concept of FAR and the 20% number of buildings lot coverage, the primary building, however you want to call it, the house, are inconsistent with each other, and there'd be a conflict with that. And if you have an FAR limit, nobody's going to get to the 20%. So why would you even have it in there?
All right, let me hear from Lee. I mean, Mike has sort of been intimately involved in this, Charlie, but we'll go to Lee first. Is Lee still on? I don't see her out on the screen, but that doesn't mean she's not participating.
I put her to sleep in court the other day, and I've done it again.
Oh, for
She's
God's
no
sake.
longer with us.
Oh, nice going, Tom. Hey, Mike, talk to this point, Mike Dickey.
Well, I mean, look, I think, you know, Clark, as Tom has correctly said, is very against this whole concept. He feels it's too much of a burden on property rights. I have no problems with it. I think it, you know, I guess I'm not sure if the number is the right number, but I like the concept. And so I kind of feel, you know, put a number on the board and at some subsequent time, if in practice, the number proves to be unworkable or not giving the town the results it wants, then, you know, we can, you know, fiddle with the number. That's kind of my thinking on this.
Okay, and since Lee isn't here, my solution
Can I
would-
just say something to that point, is that that's why this was put in. To allow for some wiggle room over the maximum allowed FAR as of right.
Tom, I would ease into
Yeah,
this.
I like that concept, frankly,
Yeah.
and is it, you maybe already mentioned this, Tom, but apparently the select board didn't like it at all. They just
No,
wanted
they
a
want it
black
out.
white, right?
They want it
to-
out. They
Yeah.
say, whatever you said is the as of right limit, that's it. Hard limit, everything over that is a variance.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think leaving some discretion in, you know, the planning board and the ZBA is a good
I
idea.
don't enjoy giving variances, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy having some flex, because circumstances are unique to each and every application. But Tom, the more I listen to this and think about it, what I would suggest a compromise. I would leave lot coverage and building coverage alone and introduce FAR, because FAR is a volumetric measure. And I would get away from all this sort of primary stuff, which is a new insertion, because I worry about people possibly gaming a system, or gee, I would like an attached garage, but if I do a detached garage, I'm okay. And I would like to see us work with the FAR as a concept and as an actual requirement, and see whether these numbers really work, whether they're compatible with the 20 and 30% coverage that we have in the bylaws, and then change one or the other if they're in conflict.
Well, if we set these FARs, they're in direct conflict with the 20%.
Why? What
They-
would they result in? More or less? Less.
Hold on. Go back to what I was looking at. Let me use the example of the house.
But also, Tom.
No, let me use the concrete example of the new proposal on Sawyer Street. So that house, again, 55,000 plus lot and a 5,000 plus house. And that said that the FAR of that house was 0.1. And allowable in RB and under this would be 0.12. All right, and that's a 5,000 square foot house total in its volume. The footprint is probably, because it's 3 stories, the
Probably
footprint's
20.
probably,
2,000.
yeah, probably 2,000 square foot. But yet if you had 20% lot coverage, you were looking at an 11,000 square foot footprint. And somebody's going to say, well, the bylaw is letting me do the 11,000 square foot footprint.
Yeah,
at
but the
same
FAR
time
is saying you can't. But
well, there's a conflict though between the two of them. Which one overrides?
yeah,
what?
but Tom, you've chosen one. Let me take a 5,000 square foot lot on the hillside, and that reverses the results. And I just think cutting back lot coverage,
All right.
and also, by the way, there should be a correction if you go down to the bottom. I mean, scroll up a little bit more below hardscape. You've made a statement.
I was
Somewhere in here, you talk about our house coverage is limited to 20%. Not true. It's a building coverage, and of course, a lot of things qualify as buildings.
all
So
right, well,
you don't want to make statements like that and have somebody kind of call you.
that's what you just did.
Well, I did, but we're here as
No, I know that.
as
and that's-
colleagues, and
That's what the.
you know,
that's
we're
what
not trying to do this at the floor at town meeting and surprise you.
But
Um,
you did last time, but that's okay.
I know, but I mean, I think this is here, can you scroll up even more or not?
No, I was just looking at the definition of floor area ratio, just so I'm,
See, I think I would introduce a FAR. I mean, I would try to find the
before,
examples where
just so
FAR
can.
you've given me an example where where somebody would say lot coverage trumps FAR. No, because FAR would be part of the bylaw. I'd like to see an example
They're
of
both part of the
FAR,
bylaws.
FAR trumps lot coverage.
All right,
or
and
building coverage.
just if I could say our definition of floor area ratio is the ratio of the sum of the gross floor area of all buildings. So floor area ratio is calculating all buildings.
Okay,
Okay.
and so that comes close to lot coverage.
All right, so now let's look at the example of a 5,000 square foot lot, which first of all, you know, again, and this is what we were talking about in the bylaw committee, is the interaction of Article 8. A 5,000 square foot lot anywhere is non-conforming.
Right.
So first of all, if it was new construction, nobody's building on it anyway without a variance, period. So it's kind of, the example
Yeah,
doesn't
if it were
really-
an undeveloped lot, but if I'm,
the argument doesn't hold with new construction at all, because you wouldn't be able to build on that lot anyway. And that's Clark's focusing on average lot size. Well, no, the town is set 50, 18, 35, and 60 is the ones we need to consider for future development. But what we have to think through is how Article 8 works. You're going to run into lots that would have a number of nonconformities already. I think you've said the percentage is close to 66 or 70% of our lots are already nonconforming. This is going to
some
add
fashion,
this
not
is going
always
to
covered.
this is going to add one. But let's say in theory the only nonconformity somehow was floor area ratio, and somebody wants to expand. Again, I think that in any scenario, the footprint measurement is going to lead to a larger house than a floor area ratio measurement. Just by definition, when you're just dealing two-dimensional and then you multiply that by 2.5, 3 stories, it's going to be much larger than what FAR will yield in any scenario.
Okay,
can-
so FAR is a more restrictive.
So that's why, well, it's restrictive in that it's accounting for volume and how the whole volume and mass of a building fits into a neighborhood, which
Well,
is
I think
the problem that we are confronting with every large home review now that we're getting is that we have neighbors who think the process is yes, no, and we can deny something. No, it isn't. But you know, they are concerned that they're getting these super large houses in a neighborhood that doesn't have houses of that size, and it throws everything, you know, a kilter, like Windy Hill Road, you know, pick a few other places in town where we've had all of a sudden these larger structures.
That's why I'm not opposed to FAR, but I
Okay.
am opposed, but I would think it would work, it could work compatibly with our two coverage measures as well. And if one of those three, you know, kind of goes tilt, okay.
Well, I think we'd have to put in a provision, since they would both exist in the bylaw, that one, we'd have to say when there is conflict, one trumps the other. We'd
Why?
have to, because trust me as a lawyer, I'm gonna say, well, you have two competing dimensions that I can use. Why is your
Different
dimension?
measures. We have setbacks.
Why is yours better than mine? If I'm gonna say, well, why can't I go to 20% footprint?
You can, but you're violating the FAR. Or why?
No,
if you
that's just
comply
it.
with
They're
why if
inconsistent.
you are violating the 20% and it's possible not to violate the FAR ratio.
I don't see that happening anywhere. The example on Sawyer Street is pretty clear. We have a 2,000 footprint house. And if it went to 0.12, it'd be like 2,200, 2,300.
Yeah, but you're focusing on the house and I'm focusing on coverage, building.
But that's what we're mostly concerned about is
Well,
is the
I'm not,
house.
and the zoning bylaws for 50 or 60 years have not been concerned with that. They've been concerned with the sheer kind of development or of a lot, whether it's primary or secondary or this or that. That's what they've been concerned. The bylaws have been based on that, and there is no concern about just a house. If it's a
I know,
house
but
that's small, I could have an accessory dwelling that's twice the size of my home. I mean, silly
But
as it sounds.
that's the major focus that people understand when they come to these large home reviews. It's the house. And the houses are being built with garages within them.
Okay, well,
And again, the floor area ratio is going to cover all of those other things, but the footprint measure is always going to be larger, no matter how you define the buildings that are covered by the bylaw. Whether it's all the buildings or just the primary house, it's just logical that the footprint measurement is always going to be larger at 20%.
So does this FAR apply to any structure on my or any building, I should say?
All right, well, looking at our current definition of floor area ratio, I just closed it. I don't want to open it up again, but it said all buildings. The gross floor area of all buildings, then it had language in there about excluding basements and attics, or, you know, qualifying basements and attics and that stuff, but it's going to be all buildings. So in
So
RB,
so where do I see that here? Where do I see that here?
well,
Not on my screen, but maybe it's below.
no, since we're not changing the definition of floor area ratio, I didn't include it in the bylaw. I don't have to, I'm not
We don't
changing.
we don't have a definition of floor area ratio in the
Yes, we
bylaw.
do. We do.
Where?
Hold it up.
me
I'll
look.
open, no, let me look. I'll open it up again. It might have been added.
No, floor area ratio, you're right. All buildings in a lot. Excluding basements, cellars, attics with ceiling heights less than underground parking, garages. Okay, so it excludes garages. So I could have a rather large garage, but that wouldn't be part of the floor area ratio.
It's calculating floor area to the gross floor area shall exclude basement, cellars, attics with ceiling height less than 7 feet, underground parking and garages. Yeah. And the calculation of total lot area shall exclude 50%.
You must see what the zoning board sees. I mean, you get a good lawyer and that lawyer is going to try to find loopholes.
Yeah, and the lawyer is going to rip apart an inconsistency.
That's
and
why
make
I
it-
wouldn't mess with the coverage. I would just add.
No, that's why it has to, that's why it has to go. The whole idea of switching to floor area ratio is to get away from two-dimensional footprint-based zoning and dimensions. It's a replacement of that. It doesn't coexist with it. It'll only coexist with the
Okay,
footprint-based coverage for all the other crap, the tennis courts and the swimming pools.
you and I disagree, and I'm going to disagree, because I think it's possible that they could be compatible and live together. But floor area ratio that would,
There's no way they could unless you significantly reduce the 20%. It would have to go down into these numbers, 15%.
I think you're making a change that is going to be difficult for citizens to agree to.
Not if they understand it. It is a replacement of it. It's not. Then they would be missing the whole idea of what floor area ratio is. It's to measure building size in proportion to a lot, period, not going by footprint. Footprint will yield horror story. If we start building to 20% footprint in this town, we won't recognize it anymore.
Dave McMorris, what do you think? Am I myopic here? No, I mean, seriously, I'm not.
I think where the conceptual problem comes in here, Woody, is in the non-conforming lot
Of
situation.
which 60% of our lots are non-conforming in the town.
Right, and I mean, a lot of the existing structures are gonna have floor area ratios that are over these already. So are they gonna need a variance to add to them? Even if they would be under 20% coverage?
That's what we were trying to account for the difference between new construction and the ones that have to go through Article 8 in the bylaw committee. And I circulated that change. And the judge says that's not what was advertised, don't put it in. Now, you know, clarify whether we can, you know, the planning board has the power, I think it does, to make the necessary changes in the course of the public hearing. We could do that. And I think we're going to need that distinction that the house that is going to be non-conforming, the house that's going to be and Clark pointed out a case from Brookline that actually says the same thing. That if it's non-conforming, it's going to go through your non-conforming process of a special permit, not a variance. The variance is going to apply to new construction, and I think we have to clarify that in this bylaw.
Yeah,
And the question is, can I get the judge's opinion on that between my court hearing tomorrow morning and, you know, getting home at 6 o'clock? I don't know that I can.
I think in fact,
I'm not getting a
our-
lot of help, by the way.
our present 8.7, which is, you know, extension and alteration of a non-conforming building or structure, is literally word for word out of 40A. That's going to trump anything in our bylaw. It's going to trump anything in our bylaw.
Yeah,
And,
and I think
it's not
Clark-
that's a special permit. There is no way in hell that any alteration is going to qualify it for a variance. If in fact it qualifies under 8.7 A or B.
I don't disagree.
No, I mean, so I mean, I would be totally opposed. And the more I think about it, the more I am totally opposed to this, not for what you're trying to do, but I think it's foolish. It's absolutely foolish. I think FAR, I would be interested to know of the towns. You went to whomever to look at other towns, Brookline or whatever.
They're bigger than us.
Well,
and
they may be
have-
bigger, but I'll bet you that they have an 8.7 A and B.
Yeah,
of
they
some
do.
sort.
And again.
So
Clark
these
pointed-
coexist.
well, I think these could easily coexist if
and-
this particular article applied to new construction or raise and rebuilds. But in any kind of a, you know,
Renovation or expansion.
expansion or
I
renov-
don't disagree, and we were trying to make that change, and the judge was putting the kibosh on it. I am getting
Yeah.
zero friggin' help from her, okay?
Okay. But what I'm
All right,
saying,
well, then you're gonna have to live with it, Tom, because I mean, certainly I think I'm getting
I'm
a
gonna
sense
try to
zoning
make the
board-
necessary, I'm gonna try to
So-
make the necessary changes for tomorrow night's
If
hearing.
you can, I could support it. If you can't, I would on the floor of town meeting oppose it. But not because of you, it's because I think it's probably, among other things, illegal to override or overrule 40A. And
I'm not-
particularly the
not trying-
second accept clause, which is,
Not trying to do that.
I know you aren't, but that's the net effect of what we have before us.
I think you'll never get this through town meeting unless it gets separated out from,
I intend to try to do that tomorrow night.
Okay.
Great.
So
Great.
With no help from town council, all right?
Okay, but it-
I'm tired of getting crap from everybody when I'm getting
Tom,
zero
people,
help.
I'm not trying to take
I'm sorry, I'm just
attack
testing. it's late
on
for
you.
me.
I am sympathetic, and as a matter of fact, I am in favor of FAR, but I think there have been towns that have introduced FARs as well as retain all the protections of the non-conforming.
I think that's the Brookline case that Clark pointed out to me. I just haven't had the time to read it yet. I think that's exactly what it says. It says that the non-conforming lots do not are subject to the non-conforming procedures of a local bylaw. That's fine.
Well,
I don't
I don't know
have a
if you
problem
said
with
that
it.
right, but I think I know what you mean, but,
So it means an FAR applied to a non-conforming, pre-existing non-conforming house is going to be subject to your Article 8 process, not a variance process.
yeah.
Fairly clear and fairly understandable and makes sense.
But it also applies to, under B, the special permit granting authority by special permit, a non-conforming use of land. And so it applies to the land as well. We're into murky, it could be new construction, but, non-conforming use of a building structure or land or structural alteration or enlargement. Yeah, I'm kind of with Dave. I mean, if there was words that could be crafted to have new construction, and frankly, new construction is not that common in town unless you think about raise and rebuild. But,
Maybe we'll just withdraw it. I'm not up for the fight.
Well, Tom, I think it's a good idea. It's just a matter of getting it
I appreciate that, but
separated so we don't have the conflict. Because you can, I mean, you can say, well, you know, it's clear because there's a case that says that, you know, 8.7 would apply rather than the FAR. True, but you know, you have to sell this on the floor of town meeting. You don't, and plus, you can't have bylaws that invite, that the average citizen has to have a lawyer to tell them what they need. You know,
Mhm.
it's got to be clear enough so that any citizen who wants to see what how their lot and their idea for a project fits in with the zoning bylaw can look it up and more or less understand it. You know, if something says raise and rebuild or new construction, this applies. Or B, for an expansion or an alteration, this applies, people can understand that. But to leave it to be something that, you know, you have to look to a SJC case or a land court case to understand, that doesn't work. And I really think this is a good idea, and I think you've written it well. I just think that it needs to have that distinction, John.
that's all right. I appreciate it. I'm just trying to create work for lawyers where one of my colleagues is trying to create work for architects. So,
I can't, you know, I oppose making work for lawyers, but
maybe the judge didn't think entirely that this
She
issue
hasn't
entirely
even,
through.
you know what, she hasn't even really looked at this, and because it's outside their scope, we have budget constraints, we've had to go into this town meeting without a lot of help from town council. They've looked at everything else but this. And
Well, okay, so this is the one thing that.
because they don't think substantive change to the bylaws within their scope of work, and, you know, then the budget got blown last time, you know. Don't get me into my criticisms of it, I just.
Okay, but I'm saying, you know,
And-
this is the one area of substantive change other than our
Yeah, and this is
our prior go around on height, where I think people are going to feel that there are circumstances in which they will have rights diminished. And
they don't understand their rights.
well, I understand it, and I think my rights could be diminished. I mean, not in my particular lot, but you know, if I lived or I had certain circumstances, I would feel aggrieved, and I don't think it's worth the fight. Particularly because I'm with Dave in thinking that FAR is good to apply, is a sensible, modernistic, or more volumetric kind of a measure that we have sorely been missing. But not if it only can come in if you take away some other kinds of lot coverage rights that are up to now been granted for everything from garages to patios and things of that sort.
Mhm.
If people are voting against something because they don't understand it, it's just as dead than if they voted against it when they did understand it. It's
Yeah,
gotta be
mhm.
something people will vote for.
And that's fine if they don't want to vote for it. You know,
Yeah, but don't use your capital that way, I think. I think there's a solution. You're concerned that the judge is gonna say, no, you're not allowed to do this, or Carolyn Murray is gonna say, I'm not sure, I don't know where they are. But I wouldn't rule out common sense prevailing.
No, I'm worried. If the town turns it down, that's fine. Then, like so many other things that have happened, like the Harbor project, they complain about it years from now when they start seeing McMansions everywhere. They're not, you know, I'll be long gone. I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm just in an attitude like I've been working.
Okay, well,
really
why
hard.
don't you sleep on it and see if there's a way
I
that
don't know. Yeah,
you can
I have to
reconcile.
try to.
I don't
string
care
things
whether it's been
together.
advertised this way or that way or some other way.
No, I think the
We're,
planning
we're
board.
trying to do the right thing
I
here.
think the planning board has the power to amend things, when we go through the process, but.
And
Everybody's
I
saying.
don't know what Clark has said, and if you
No,
want to share
I-
it, fine. If you don't, fine. I mean, I don't
You
know.
know, he's put some materials together for tomorrow night.
Well, it sounds to me like a lot of Clark's concern has to do with non-conforming lots.
No, a lot of Clark's concern is restricting people's flexibility to build whatever the hell they want.
Well, yeah. I
Well,
think
that may be, but
probably the minority
yeah,
on it.
well, I mean,
And that's gonna be the opposition that you know, and again, because it comes from a misconception people have that they can do anything the hell they want, and they can't. It's just not the law. It's never been the law. Goes back to the Middle Ages. It hasn't been the law.
right. And I'm thinking that to introduce something additional is an easier sell than to take something away. And if I could go before town meeting and say, look, lot coverage and building coverage is the same for residential districts, but we are dealing with volume here as well. We're taking nothing away. We may be imposing a different standard on a few, but we're not taking away basic coverage rights. But if
But they won't work together. I'm just telling you, just
okay, well, you've studied it a lot more than I have.
think it through. Just think it through. Pick any lot and pick numbers. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think we probably
I
offline,
don't know.
offline should do exactly that.
I know. I'm not. My concern is having the time tomorrow to deal with it.
Well, you don't have the time between now and tomorrow evening, but that's the door doesn't shut for all time.
No, we can continue our hearing another night. So, I mean, fortunately, we're far enough away from June that we have some flexibility. But,
Good Lord, I hope. Yeah.
um,
And I'm happy to lend a hand, Tom. I mean, but I'm not a lawyer. I mean, all I can do is
no,
crunch some
there's
numbers
two
and things
things.
like
There's
that.
two things I have to do. Is I have to find that case that Clark referred to. It's something with the B versus Brookline, and then I got to look at the Brookline bylaw.
Yeah. Fortunately,
Brook-
all the bylaws are online.
No, the Brookline numbers are far different than we do, but Brookline has more urban compact development. That's why.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what towns, I
There
would think,
No, there are no small towns. I'll say that again. There are no small towns that do this. We'll be the first or one of the first. Who cares about that? The concept, it makes sense. And maybe you're not seeing it as much as we are on these large home reviews, but there's people in this town who can't stand what's going on in the pattern of house development. It's
okay, well, I mean, unfortunately, for the next couple of days, I'm like you are, but for different reasons. Somewhat flat out, but I'm happy to do some, maybe do research on towns that have FARs and also have things like lot coverage and see how they handle it,
Yeah,
or non-conforming lots. Just, I mean, I don't
No,
know.
I'm pretty sure that case says that you have to, a non-conforming lot, a non-conforming property is going to have to conform to whatever your version of Article 8 is, and you can't make it a variance. And that's fine.
Yeah,
That's the distinction I was trying to write on the fly, a week ago Monday. And the
well,
judge
yeah.
said,
I
no.
mean, I think it's it would be crystal clear to anyone, any lawyer or land use lawyer, that in fact, a local bylaw cannot, interfere with, you
Right.
know,
And I'm sure that that was what was presented when Brookline first switched to FAR. And so they got sued, and it's now clarified. I just gotta have the time to read it, so.
okay, well, maybe when you read it, if you have the time, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow.
No, but I have to,
Give us your top
I
line
can do the
evaluation.
amendment. I mean, I'm gonna suggest, I'm not gonna object to going back to 30% for the overall coverage, but the 20% lot coverage and FAR just don't work together. They just.
Okay,
simply
maybe,
don't.
maybe some good examples, real life examples would be
No,
instruction.
I gave you one, but you can pick any lot you want, whether it's 55,000 with a 5,000 square foot house or 5,000 with a 500 square foot house. The footprint measurement is going to be a larger house. Except, with the possibility they might be somewhat similar, like our data shows that on the very smallest of lots in RA, RB, and RC, that's where we approach close to 20% lot coverage.
But wouldn't this also
And the
apply
FAR is gonna
to
be-
ranch houses and things? I mean, ranch houses, there are a couple of ranch houses on Pleasant Street. I know where Cushing intersects. I don't know who, I don't know any of the people, but, you could have lot coverage that's probably more than 20%, but an FAR that's, 0.0.
You know what, that's funny that Clark pointed out an example of a particular person's property, and I'm not gonna name them, but that has a 0.32 FAR for their existing house. And so they'd be non-conforming as to FAR, they're probably non-conforming as to a lot of things. And what would they be able to do to expand if they wanted to expand? And, the argument was that under this, they wouldn't be able to expand their FAR, expand the house because they're way over the FAR limit. But if that case says a pre-existing non-conforming can go through your Article 8 process, and you might grant it by special permit. It's not substantially more detrimental.
Yeah, but see, I'm thinking,
You
all right,
could- you
all right,
could
we've kind of into a circular discussion at this point. I'm suggesting, and I think Dave was with me and Matt, that compatibility, could they work together? Not, as opposed to be, it's one or the other. And I'm thinking that if an FAR says you're at the beyond the limit, but you're not on lot coverage or building coverage, I mean, I'd have to see statistics or get it. I'm sure there's an example of that or two in town to understand that. But if the FAR says, sorry, you're already too large, I don't know.
I'll figure it out. All right.
Anyway, I hats off though. I mean, it's a hell of a job.
I appreciate it. I'm not, and I'm not trying to bitch you on, but I am bitching on. I got a lot of crap going on, so I just.
Well, look at, I mean, the document in toto is quite something, more than I expected to see. So,
Wow. And if this one has to get withdrawn, so be it. But
well, you're not going to withdraw everything. You might withdraw.
no, this is be the only one. The others will go through.
Yeah. To my mind, that's a win in and of itself, because our bylaws have been a dog's breakfast for decades.
Yeah, again, I'm just at a point where I've been doing this for 3 years and can't do it anymore.
Well, I think you brought it a hell of a long way. That's all. And I'm not in the habit of giving you idle praise, Tom. So take it take it as being genuine.
And the only thing I ask that happen is that we sort all this out before town meeting.
Sure.
Dave, you asked me a question at 11:15 at night to try to zing me, and I don't want to get zinged at 11:15 at night.
You zinged you?
Yeah, you tried. I think I fought you off.
I mean,
You got up at town meeting and asked a question. And, you know, after we had gone through all of this process, and you zing me with a question at town meeting. I don't appreciate stuff like that. Air it out now. You know,
Look at, we're in a good place, Tom. Let's
I
not,
know, I know. I'm
let's
just-
not,
all right, no, it's just asking
Let's-
as a favor, you know, I'm gonna get enough slings and arrows from everybody else, so. Anyway.
Well, don't
just-
invite any more. I mean, you know, I mean, I think we're in a place where there is a win here and
All right,
you
all
go
right,
for it.
no, that's all right. I'm just, again, I'm tired, so thank
I
you
know,
for your feedback, and I'll see where we are tomorrow.
Well, that's why we met. I mean, I know as much. I think my wife has cooked dinner and done the dishes and she's just
Yeah.
about to go on to bed, but
Yeah, and she's saying, tell
didn't expect
Callahan.
this quite so long. It was all Mike Dickey's fault, who's
She's saying, tell Callahan.
slowing us down here, but
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, well,
All right. All right, we'll see what happens tomorrow. Any of you can listen in tomorrow. We're not doing the hybrid meeting. We'll just be on Zoom tomorrow. We have one large home review, and then we'll probably get to this around 7:15, I suppose.
I'll make a note.
And we're not doing we're not doing a vote on those drafted articles at this stage, or?
I could vote to approve everything except this last one, ZBC.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is that a goal of yours, Tom, to have us do that?
Well, yeah, whenever the warrant needs your recommendations, I'd like to have it in print, you know, so.
Oh, so you don't need it tonight?
I
Yeah, I'm
guess
in the
not.
same boat. I mean,
I guess not. I
I have
mean,
no
I'm,
problem.
yeah,
I have
I'm
no problem
assuming you're
endorsing the
whatever,
others except
however
for the
many,
last.
yeah,
Well,
however many numbers
Matt,
are.
did you have any hesitations on the articles before us, given a, you know, an edit here or there or whatever, but
Yeah, I'm comfortable with all the prior ones, so I mean, yeah, if there's value in getting.
Yeah, well, right now, there's only 3 of you, so, no, it's 4 of you, so, you know, whatever, when we get to the point of the.
well, we
warrant-
could take a vote tonight. I'm sure Charlie and Lee are kind of with us on the, you know,
Yeah,
on the others. Mike, I assume you are too.
well, I'm good with all of them. So what, would we break it into 2? One for the one where there seems to be some unanimity, and then a split on the final article?
no,
Right.
forget even taking a vote on the final.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could vote in the first 7.
I mean, I could just report that right now you're 4-0 on all the others. And
I'd make a
Yeah.
motion to approve. I know, Tom, so I state this correctly, and Montana, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Articles 1 through 7 that we're approving, and Article 8 we're deferring for a later time? I don't have that sheet in front of me. I mean, on
Yeah,
my screen.
As far as 9 goes, that just.
Oh, is it 9? So it's
No,
1 through,
9 is the amendments to large home review, and I'll fix that, but that's important. That's not important right now.
all right, why don't we say 1 through 7?
Yeah.
Leaving aside 8, which we've just been on for an hour or more. And 9, the large home review needs just a little wordsmithing.
I'll second your motion, Woody.
Okay, so moved and seconded to approve Articles 1 through 7. Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris,
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Washington.
Okay, so we've approved it, and Tom, so you've got that in your hip pocket. Zoning board to approve those 7.
Right.
When the large home review is.
Yeah, the large home
Voting is
review will
fine.
just, the large home review.
Bring it
will
back
just-
to us. We could handle it in our May meeting or something. It's not.
Yeah, the large home review will just be the edits that are
Yeah,
necessary.
because we don't interact with the large home review as a board. It's just as,
Yeah.
more as citizens that we're giving.
We should be thankful for that.
Okay.
All
So,
right, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. I
Thank
do.
you, Tom.
All
all
right,
righty.
see you later.
Okay, everybody.
Guys,
Thank you.
Thank you,
Monica.
Montana. I hope you get time and a half.
maybe.
Okay.
All
I
right,
got it.
talk to you, Elson.